Good afternoon, everyone. I had the distinct privilege and opportunity to do a webinar for NCR and some of the Sevens coaches a few weeks back. I know a few of them couldn't make it, and I thought I'll just go ahead and put this on YouTube so people can see what we discussed. The topic for the webinar was basic Sevens performance analysis, and we were looking at some key performance indicators that you want to establish in your team, and then figuring out a theme, and then how you can implement that during the course of your training for the week. So we'll just get right into it, and we'll try and make this as short and painless as possible. Right. So the coaching challenge, right? So one of the coaching challenges we have in the US is that many coaches try and analyze the game, but they struggle to look at what they're looking at or how they can implement that in their training. There's an overwhelming amount of data that often leads to confusion, not just with them, but with the players as well. And I think once we have, clear metrics, we can have actions as coaches that we can fall back onto and not make emotional decisions, but rather objective insights about the game. So like I said, the three areas that we're going to focus on this webinar is the core KPIs. So KPIs is key performance indicators. And, the disclaimer here is as a program, and regardless of where you are in your journey, whether you're a new program, an older program, or a pro program, or in between, you need to figure out as a coach, what are the indicators, what are the performance areas of the game that you want to look at and that you want to focus on. So I have about 5 or 7 essential areas that I look at, and then obviously I can layer up from there, which we'll get into a different slide when we get to that. And obviously then after that we want to look at the post game review. So once you have collected all the data, we're going to now look at what is the most important data, what are the ones that we're going to focus on, and that's going to have a direct impact on our game before the next tournament. And after that, we're going to figure out what is an actionable theme, and looking at 2-3 key areas that we can implement in our training for the week. So one thing we want to discuss is we want to actually see what the purpose of analysis is. There is a lot of coaches the game has been evolving, and as a coach, whether you like the game evolving and changing, if you're stuck in the 1980s mentality, trying to coach that way, then you're going to have the same results, right? As much as you see eye to eye or don't see eye to eye with some of the changes in the game, you as a coach and an analyst needs to go and grow with the game, right? I think data can be very important and can bring a valuable aspect to the game, and I think it's an underutilized aspect of the game that most younger coaches overlook. So let's look at the purpose of analysis. Obviously, we're looking for objective clarity, right? So objective clarity, that eliminates emotion and exposes the reality. And I think the key thing here is to remember the reality. I'll give you a quick example. Say, for instance, you have a scrum half. He played definitely under par. He did not have his best performance in the first half. But let's say 90 seconds before the end of the first half, there's a 5-meter scrum, and he scores a 90-meter try, dummying 2 people and trucking 1 guy, and it's just everyone goes into a locker room. They are excited, they are happy, they're full of emotions, and they're going into the second half with momentum. Right now, that emotions and that type of excitement can easily be overlooked. And I think that's where data comes in, and the objectiveness about looking at it from a data aspect, because younger coaches, including myself when I started coaching, is you're so overwhelmed by the performance that you really don't realize that great, you had a 90-meter try in the last 10 seconds of the second half of the first half. However, if you really deep down look at his data or his performance, he wasn't doing that well. So maybe I should still go ahead and make a substitution, right? So the next area is the evidence-based coaching. So now you can make guided decisions. You're actually using facts, you're not using feelings. So when you're sitting a player down or you're sitting your team down, you can now actually give them evidence-based data. And then out of that, you can have evidence-based coaching. So it's not, oh, my coach said I missed 5 tackles and I know I only missed 4 type of situation. It's more like, I call it a get out of jail free card for coaches, where you just go there and show them. And at the end of the day, the data don't lie. The other purpose of analysis is pattern recognition. So now that can identify not only in your team, but in the other team also their weaknesses and strengths. You can identify certain patterns. You can identify certain areas of the game that there is a drop off or an increase, right? For instance, if you bring your substitutions in and you realize that there's a shift in tempo and your patterns aren't, or your system aren't getting played effectively, then you know that there is some sort of a pattern where your substitutes are not really considered impact subs. So that's just a good example on that. The other aspect, or the other purpose of analysis, is targeted player growth, right? So now you can kind of give them your player specific feedback, and there's measurable improvements. So you can tell them, you know what, you've missed 7 out of your 10 tackles, so we want to increase that, and we decrease that. We make sure you make more of your tackles. So now that gives them little goals and little achievements and levels that they want to kind of adhere to or level up to. So from a targeted player growth, this is massive in regards to the younger players that are so data driven with their sports in the US these days, that I think this will help a team out immensely. And then obviously tactical refinement, and you can look at that from both sides of the ball. You can look at it from from an attacking side and from a defensive side. You can also look at your team and another team, and how you can refine your tactics and figure out what works for you and what does not work for you, right? I have a personal process that I go through every tournament, and I even go as far as doing it every season. We call it the bank, build, and burn process. So what we'll look at is we look at everything we've done right, and we'll kind of bank that stuff that we did well, some of the KPIs that we had, we'll bank that, right? And then we'll start looking at things that obviously is not working. There's a pattern, like I said, you just recognize the pattern. There's something is not working, and we'll kind of burn that. And then what's left, we'll start building on top of that, right? So we'll kind of bank what worked, we'll burn what didn't work, and then we'll build on top of what we have left. So that's a good approach that you can have for your season, is following the bank, build, and burn process. All right, so one of the main things that I've noticed, and obviously, in the non-playing rugby country, it's a little different, but, if you are a true club team, whether that's D1, D2, D1AA, or whatever the situation is, every young club, especially in the US, are struggling with budget restrictions. They might not have the fancy equipment. They might not have all the fancy, they might not have the ability to actually hire an analyst, right? So what I started doing is, and this is more out of necessity and survival, is I started building my own analysis team with the resources I have, right? And it's not on this slide, but there's cell phones, there's iPads, there's cameras, there's way that you can actually just videotape your training sessions and film that and analyze it. So there's ways around that. You don't need to buy all the fancy equipment. Obviously, recently I did an interview with Vio. Vio is a great way for you to record your practices, and it gives you good insight in the game. So the way I started building my analysis team is I focused on the top two individuals that I focused on was, number one, the injured players and substitutes, right? So from an injured player standpoint, you got to understand that their psychology is already kind of in the dumps because they're injured. They don't feel like they can actually contribute to the team. So I started realizing that if I get them involved with the team, whether that's with data, with filming, even if it's just scrums or whatever the situation is, you kind of make them part of your analysis team. And now that it gives them a little bit of skin in the game, and it feels that they're actually now contributing to the season or the outcome of the game. Substitutes is a good one. Say, for instance, if you are traveling with a 13th that you didn't activate for that game, maybe that 13th can help you do a few key points that they want you to look at, right? Assistant coaches is great, and obviously engage parents, but that's up to your discretion. So what we want to do is once you've actually now narrowed down who the individual is that you're going to have help you, now what I will do is I will give them specific tasks. For instance, say we have 2 injured players, and then I will have one guy just look at the attacking side of the ball. I'll have another one look at the defensive side of the ball, and under that you'll give them maybe on the attack, how many times did if we're scouting a different team, how many times did that team break blind off the scrum, or where are they throwing in? Is it the middle, front, or back in the line out? Whatever the situation is, right? And then from the defensive side of the ball, that guy can look at your defense and say, well, we are missing some tackles in the midfield. We might want to shore that up, and then it'll give you enough data to kind of just make some changes at the half, and also kind of give you an insight in the game. Now, what I usually do is before a game, I give them a macro goal and 2 micro goals, right? So obviously the macro goal is you want to win that game. I mean, that's par for the course. And then you start giving them 2 micro goals. For instance, you tell them, for this game, I want you to focus on having a 90% success rate on a set piece, and I want you guys to set the outside platform or the outside breakdown, 5 times this game, right? So what you can do now is have your substitutes track that, and when you're looking at the end of the game, when you have a quick, at the half, you kind of tell them where they are in regards of achieving those little micro goals. And at the end of the game, you can have a breakdown and say, okay, well, you know what, we won the game and great. You know, we hit one of our KPIs or one of our goals, but we didn't hit the other goal, right? Or we've lost the game, but we've hit both of the goals, and it gives them a sense of like there's still some upward trajectory. The caveat there is once you achieve a goal, that now becomes a standard, and you give them another KPI, and eventually during the course of the day, you'll start building up, and then what happens is, you start, just getting better and better. So when you look at the actual benefits beyond the data, so obviously you're keeping your injured players involved, making them feel connected with the team, and then it also develops a deeper understanding, excuse me, a deeper understanding of the game, right? For instance, on a Sunday, I will now go and I will actually identify 3 or 4 players and say, I want you guys to look at this game. Rocco, I want you to look at the breakdowns. Gus, I want you to look at the Y channels. Roman, I want you to look at the, at our attack or our defense. And what it does is now they go and now instead of looking and watching for their own highlights, they're now actually taking their job and they're looking at those KPIs that we're looking at. Now, as a coach, I already have that data. I just want to kind of see what they look at. And every now and then there'll be a surprise. There was an example of a player that actually I didn't notice it, but he noticed that there was a lineout trigger that one of our teams were doing right, and then it kind of gave away where they were going to throw, and that was discovered by us, asking that player to analyze the set pieces. So they develop a deeper understanding. They're not just there to look at themselves and look at highlights, right? Obviously, it creates leadership opportunities. So you can actually have your players lead the analysis session and make the corrections and also implement some of the changes. And obviously, you're building analytical skills in your players so they can actually look at the game differently. So that's just an easy way to kind of just build yourself an analysis team. Like I said, there's a lot of ways that you can utilize, a cell phone, a iPad or something during the course of training. Maybe you have an iPad or a cell phone on each side of the scrum and kind of record both and then sync them together on QuickTime and then just kind of have a look at their body height. You can make live corrections there too. I use the lineout as an example. Maybe use your cell phone, video the lineout from the side, and especially if you have an issue, maybe your middle or your back lineout, then we can kind of go back, do a few lineouts, come back, bring them in, huddle up and look at the film on the iPad or on the phone and kind of see where we need to make corrections. So there's ways around trying to make sure that you get the data that you need. So when we look at basic performance indicators or key performance indicators, I like to kind of level up, and every action on the field has a few deeper layers that you can look at, right? So attack has numerous layers you can delve down into, defense and set pieces. In my instance, I would say if you're a younger coach, just focus on the minimum data that will give them the maximum outcome in regards of what you can change during the course of your weekly training session. When you look at like level 1 attack, your possession percentage is good. How long did you have the ball, and then you can figure out what's how effective your attack was by actually now taking your possession time and then dividing it by the tries that you scored, and that can give you an aspect of like we scored every 60-70 seconds that we scored a try. So what you can now do is now you set your benchmark and say that, ideally in this tournament, we want to score a try every 90 seconds. And when you go back and look at the tournament, you can see that, well, our average of tries that we scored was 110 seconds or 2 minutes, right? Now you can go back to your weekly training and say, well, we're going to have a few scenarios. We want to score a try off a set piece in under 90 seconds. So that's how you can sort of build your weekly training out. A good area to look at is line breaks. Now that's line breaks where we're on attack. So what areas of the field did you have the most success, whether that's on the outside or the midfield? And then obviously ruck speed, where it's fast ball or slow ball, that's something that you can kind of look at. Now, obviously, not everyone has the ability to actually time ruck speed. So what you can do is obviously set a standard. I think my standard is 2 seconds per ruck. When a ruck is set, you just have the player or the guy next to you that's doing the analysis just count 1, 2, 3, so that's a slow ruck speed, so we'll just write slow, or 1, 2 balls out, and that's a fast ruck speed. So that's a way to kind of just calculate, and you just count how many fast and how many slow rucks you had, and that will give you an idea of where you are. If you look at defense, you want to always look at your tackle completion. You want to see where the success rate is. My standard for our tackles is 85% across the board for the tournament. So then that will give us an idea of where we need to fix stuff. And you also want to look at maybe where the tackles were missed. Was it on the edge? Was it in the midfield? So that will give you an idea of where you need to shore up your defense. And then on defense, you can look at turnovers won or lost and in regards of that aspect. Set piece is pretty self-explanatory. You want to look at your execution rate. How many did you win? How many did you lose? The one I really like to do in level 1 is the effective strike outcomes, meaning that if you say, for instance, had a 5-meter scrum, did you score off that 5-meter scrum? So that's a positive strike outcome, or you did not score off that 5-meter scrum. Now that's again a negative strike outcome. And again, that tells you a story. If you have 4 scrums and you had 3 of them had negative outcomes, then clearly that tells you that you need to work on your set piece strike plays and figure out what you need to tune up. We're going to focus on attack, and then obviously now we can look at level 2, level 3. And this is just an idea of how you can really dive deep into your attack or your defense or your set piece. I try not to share a lot of information with my players, because there is a saying, analysis by paralysis, where like too much information is not always the best. But usually when it comes to level 2, 3 and up to that, I kind of just do it for myself and see if there's any stories or any deeper things that I can kind of look at that I personally can tweak from my coaching so I can help them out. Let's, for instance, say we decided we're going to go for level 2 on attack. A good thing is, we decided we're going to do possession percentage, but maybe we can break down the possession percentage into the first and second half, right? Now, where did we have the possession of the ball more in the first or the second? So that tells you another story. We talked about line breaks in level 1. Maybe now we can look at line break zones, like actually figuring out what areas was the line broken between the winger and the center, was the line broken between the pivot or the 10 and the center, or whatever the situation is. Now you can figure out where your weak link is. On attack, look at your success rate on your open and blind side attack. Did you have a really good success rate on the blind side or the open side? And obviously you can look at turnovers lost and figure out where you can do that. Now you can once level deeper. You figure out possession, you figure out your first and second half possession. Now you can look at maybe how many points did you score entering the 22. So every time you enter the 22 or their 22, did you walk out of there with points? Point source is a good one. You can actually figure out, did most of our points come from set pieces? Did most of our points come from free open play or from turnover ball? And that will give you an idea of what our strongest attacking pattern is. And then we also look at positive gain line rucks. So that's up for interpretation, and every analyst does it differently. What I do for my program is for a positive gain line ruck, for instance, let's say there was a ruck on the halfway line for us. We got the ball wide, and then we set our first phase ruck on their 10 meters. So that means that we have, obviously 10 meters past the ruck, so past the initial scrum. So that is a positive gain line ruck for me. And then we'll just keep, going from there. Now, if, say, for instance, we did win the scrum, but we got tackled before the halfway line, that's a negative breakdown ruck. And that will also give you an idea of, what areas we can attack. Are we effectively hitting the gain line? Are we effectively breaking the gain line? And then that will, like I said, it's all telling you a story about your game. And in speed of threes is big for us in attack, where we want to make sure that if someone's tackled, there's someone over them, and then we have a distributor there to get the ball out. But you can go down and look at the defense and the set pieces. So basically what you're trying to do is just figure out what your basic KPIs are. And those are the things that you kind of look and share with your players, and that will kind of set the theme for what's going to happen in the week and what you want to fix. And then obviously as a coach, if you're interested in it, you can go to level 2, you can go to level 3 and whatever, but like I said, don't get too overwhelmed. At the end of the day, data is not the Bible. It's not the make all and break all, right? There is a lot of outliers sometimes, and you can't always just assume that the data is going to be the savior, but it will give you an objective overview of what needs to fix. Now, a coach that's been in the game for long enough knows the game can kind of see that, but it just reinforces his belief that we are struggling in certain areas once he has data to back that up. I had the privilege for about 2 years to work under Dave Gardner. He was the lead analyst for the USA Sevens leading up to the Olympics. And I did the opposition analysis. And I remember when I started kind of working under him and just shadowing and trying to figure out, if this analysis game is for me, he gave me a few he gave me a few games that I had to analyze myself. And then what we did is he already analyzed the games, and then we'll compare the numbers. And the one area that we kind of had difficulties in is that what I would consider a positive breakdown, he might consider a negative one, or vice versa. And it made me realize that, or heck, I think I won't be surprised if he actually said it, but it came to a point where you need to, as a coach, almost wear two separate hats, right? Because a lot of us don't have the funds to have a separate analyst, and then you be the coach and you have an analyst department, right? So as a coach, you need to figure out, what hat am I wearing today? So when you're reviewing the game, you want to wear two hats. With your analyst hat, you're staying objective and you're coding the outcomes only, what happened, and you're not really looking at how it happened or what the technique was, right? So when you put your coaching hat on, now you can look at the game differently, and you can look at the data and say, okay, from a coaching perspective, this is what I need to fix. So the example about the breakdowns that we had, there was a breakdown. I think Perry Baker set the ruck. It wasn't, his body height wasn't great. It was really difficult. It wasn't the most prettiest breakdown. There was, I think Madison or someone had had some pressure around the breakdown. The ball came out, but in my opinion, as a coach, that was not the best and effective breakdown. Now, clearly, I had my coaching hats on in that instance, and from a coaching perspective, that's definitely not an effective breakdown. But Dave would code that breakdown as a positive breakdown, because at the end of the day, he's not there as an analyst to look at the technique. He's not looking at what he needs to fix as a coach. He's looking at the outcome. The outcome is, regardless of how ugly the ruck was, we did maintain the ball and we did get it out. So that's where I like to tell people, if you are the analyst and the coach in the team, make sure that, and you almost have that little exercise where I'm about to code a game. I'm taking my coaching hat off and I'm putting my analyst hat on. I'm looking at the game objectively. Once I have the game and everything, all the themes that I need to work on, now I'll put my coaching hat back on, and now I'm going to fix what I can from the findings that I had. So that was a very, very valuable lesson that he taught me in regards to how to look at the game. Now, obviously, there's a lot of different discrepancies. Certain analysts are looking at different things. I'm looking at different things, but I figured out what worked for me and my teams. And we might have another analyst do the same webinar, and he'll have some different information. But at the end of the day, that's what's been working for me, and it's something that I've been figured out for myself. All right, so let's assume that we have now utilized the players, that we've collected all the data, all the basic data that we wanted to collect for the day or for the tournament. Now we want to break down and ask ourselves a few questions. We want to read the game and want to read what is in front of us, right? So what we want to do is we want to highlight about 2 or 3 issues that had the biggest impact on the game, and then we want to identify the root causes and not just the outcomes, right? So for instance, to me it falls in 3 buckets. Did that issue, was it a skill situation issue? Was it a system alignment, an error? Was it a decision making under pressure error, or was it just fitness and fatigue? And then you can remove the emotion, you can use the evidence, and you can look at 2 or 3 priorities and how you want to change your maybe your pattern or maybe your attack or defense. In the way of you discovering this information, you want to ask yourself a few questions and ask the team a few questions, and there's a few examples to your left. For instance, where did we score? Did we score on the wide channels? Did we score in the middle of the field? That gives us an idea where most of where we say we had the most success. So we might determine that we are pretty, their outside defense wasn't good, and most of our tries were scored on the outside channel. So that gives us a good idea of that's an effective one, right? We can look at did our energy improve when the substitutions came on? Now that ties into, the data do you have in possession. So let's say, for instance, the second half the subs came on, all of a sudden our possession declined. We were on defense more than attack. And that leads us to believe that there was a lot more handling errors. So now you can establish that once the substitutes came on, there was an actual dip in your performance. And these were the reasons why there was a dip. So that's something that you can highlight for the week. Where did we concede our tries? Was it off set pieces? Was it off turnover ball? Was it off just open play? So we can shore that up if we need to. Did we win our restarts? Did we regain our restarts? Is a good one. And then did we create space, or did we force passes? So, as I said earlier, as a program, you need to figure out what questions you want to ask for yourself and what will have a direct impact on your team if you do decide to change that. So once you have that established, you're looking at 2 or 3 areas that you want to highlight for the week. And now we can go into actually building the training plan for the week. So this is the slide that I show the coaches. Now, obviously, this is sample data. There's no rhyme and reason to that, but there is one or two areas on the actual slide that I showed that I wanted them to have a look at, and kind of just areas that jumps out to them that they would think it's something that they want to correct. Right. The first area to me and to them was the lineouts. If you look at the lineout percentage success, it was like 60%. We're aiming for 85 to 90% on our lineouts, and then just below that, we can see in the red that 4 of our lineouts were lost in the middle. So that tells us that's an area that we need to fix, right? And that's not got anything to do with fitness. It's not fatigue under pressure. It just comes down to skill execution and knowing the system, right? So to me, that's one highlight that we want to maybe focus on for the week, is maybe look if we can shore up our lineouts in the middle. The other one that what's jumped out to them was the ruck speed. So our average ruck speed over the tournament was 3.5 seconds, and our KPI or our goal was trying to keep our ruck speed around 2 seconds. So now what we do now is, for the week, we can figure out, well, maybe we can put in some gameplay scenarios where we put them under fatigue. We can see if we can get our speed of threes, which, remember, the speed of threes is the person getting tackled, the guy securing the tackle, also securing the ruck, and the distributor, if those speed of threes are working in conjunction and giving us effective speed. And then obviously the third thing that stood out for them was the 63% on our tackle success. So over the course of the tournament, we only made 63% of our tackles, right? And if you remember, our tackle standard is 85%, or whatever your tackle standard is for the program that you deem is effective. Clearly, they didn't make that KPI. So those were the 3 areas that the coaches isolated. They isolated that we need to work on lineouts, we need to work on more effective breakdown speed, and obviously we needed to work on our defense. Yes, there is a few other things there. For instance, the 2 yellows doesn't help. The penalties against is a lot. And then obviously the turnovers lost is also areas that you can focus down on, right? But I think those key 3 areas right there is what they came up with, and that's something that we can build a training program of. So once you've now established your 3 biggest problems, and then you're looking at the 3 biggest problems that had the greatest impact on the game, you want to prioritize them for the week, right? Now, like I said, you want to kind of just figure out if the issue stems from skill. Was it system-based? Was it decision-making? Or was it just performance under fatigue? And then from there, you can kind of just build your week and determine what works for you, right? You want to strip back the root cause. It's not just a symptom, and you want to build a training around correcting those specific areas. Okay. The 4 questions you got to ask, can it be corrected through skill, system, or decision making? And then you can go from there. Now, once you figure out, we figured out that we are looking at our rucks. So our weekly standard targets that we would share with the players is, for instance, we want to make sure that every ruck we set for the next week in the training blocks is under 3 seconds average. If we start doing contact blocks, we want to have an 85% minimum success rate on our tackles. And then once we do, scenario-based game run-throughs, we want to have a 90% success rate on our lineouts, because those are the key 3 areas that jumped out to the coaches in the data visualization that I showed them prior. So we're fortunate enough that we have multiple days that we can train, but let's say, for instance, you only have 3 days. The way I like to break my weeks up is, number 1, day 1, a little bit lower tempo, a little bit of lower load. That's more of what we call our install or technical correction day. So for instance, we've now isolated what we need to work on. We've isolated and identified that these are the areas that we're struggling in. So let's kind of walk through what we want to do. Let's walk through some of the drills that we're going to try and do. Let's focus on, for instance, like I said, the focus area would be breakdown efficiency. We'll look at some tackle techniques, and maybe reiterate what our tackle technique looks like, break down what goes into a tackle, and then also just walk through your middle lineout throws. So everyone has clarity of role, and everyone understands that this is your job when we're going for a lineout. And then you can always put in a condition game. So for instance, I like to play game-based scenario games where you give them say, for instance, last line out of the game, you're down by 1 try, and it's the last play of the game. You need to score to even tie the game or to win the game. So now you give them a goal, and you give them that scenario where this is a real live game simulation. Obviously, you can figure out what drills works for you, and what coaching points you want to highlight. But then every day has a target outcome, right? So we want to look at -2 second recycles. We want to look at 90% completion, and everything that you determined you want to look at. The second day is a little bit more, that's why it's red. It's a little bit more intense. We want to actually now put them under fatigue, and we want to make sure that we can actually implement contact contact. So for us, we call that D-Day. That's kind of where we start making a little bit more contact, and we start, just implementing what we've installed the previous day into live scenarios. For instance, we'll try and get them fatigued by maybe doing a quick fitness block and then going into a open play gameplay scenario where they've got to set breakdowns, and we can look at how they set their breakdowns under fatigue and what we need to work on there. Or the focus area will be defensive accuracy, line-out attack, and then game simulation and scenarios is what we discussed earlier. Now, what I do is with my game-based scenarios and my contact blocks is my teams do not play full sevens matches on Tuesdays. They literally play blocks of 2-3 minutes. So they'll have 2 minutes of live contact, and they'll have a minute that we can kind of rest and readjust and kind of just figure out what we're going to do. So we'll do 2 of those blocks before we get a water break to kind of simulate the intensity of a game. A few reasons I do that is, number one, usually when you have these players that are obviously not all of them are fit, not all of them are up to par, you start pushing them for 7 minutes or 14 minutes per contact block. There's always room for injuries, and there's always room for them to getting fatigued. So now at the end of the day, they're not really doing the skill because all they're worried about is when the next water break is and how tired they are. So I've noticed from my program, like I said, that what works for me is 2-minute contact blocks with a 1-minute break. We'll do 2 of those, and we'll have a longer water break where the captains can make some adjustments if they need to. Within that contact blocks, that's when we start implementing the gameplay scenarios. We might place 4 balls on the field. Say there's 1 ball in the middle. That'll be your scrum. There'll be a ball in the 22 with a lineout going in. There'll be a ball on the opposing 22 with an exit. And then you tell the first team that's on defense, the first team that's on attack, and say, right, you've got 4 scenarios, and each scenario has multiple phases to execute that scenario. And then once that is done, you'll grab water, and then you will rotate, and the defense will be on attack, right? So the key is there now. You're giving them a goal. You're giving them a challenge. You want them to have a 4 out of 4 or a 5 out of 5 completion on their scenarios from the attacking standpoint. And from the defensive standpoint, you want to shut them down and make sure that we have a 3-phase shutdown or whatever the defense's KPIs is that you want to work on. So that's kind of how we basically do our D-Day. And then on our third day, this is our sharp and confident day. This is when we kind of like just oil the machine, make sure that all the gears are turning, that everyone's in the same page, that there's clarity of role. Low contact, we'll do 2-hand touch, go down. Now, if the tempo, the momentum, or the energy is not there, we might go into what we call Canterbury rucks, meaning that everything else is 2-hand touch, go down, shoulder on maybe, but the ruck's alive, or the scrum out, all the scrums are live, right? But that's all up for interpretation on how you feel that your training is going. We try not to push them, but we want to focus on giving them scenarios again where they are playing from outside the 22 or free kick at the half, or whatever the situation is, and just kind of just shore up what our system is and what our default pattern is and what we want to work on. So that's kind of, I would say, a basic setup of how I would prefer to set up the week. Like I said, if you have 2 days, you've got to adjust that. If you have 3-4 days, you can adjust that accordingly. But I think that's the theme that we're trying to figure out is what's going to make a direct impact on the game on Saturday. Now, you might have it might have been your first tournament and you realize that you are not as fit. There's not a chance in hell you're going to get them fit in 1 week. So why are we spending, all these hours trying to get them fit when we can focus on what's going to have an actual effect on the game? And I think that's what we want to narrow down on. Not saying don't do fitness. Clearly there is fitness in between. The boys are lifting in the morning. They're doing whatever fitness they need to. But from a correction standpoint and from an analyst/coach standpoint, these are the 3 areas that we are focusing on this week. Yes, this is a quick example I shared with some of the coaches in regards of some of the data visualization examples and how you can present that to your players. The one in the top corner is from Madison Hughes when he played for me at the Expert. So that's what I gave them in regards of what their performance was during the course of the tournament. And that gives an idea of where they stand and how they are tracking for the season. I like kind of giving some of my players these KPIs because it always drums up a competition to kind of see who's better in certain areas of the game. And then obviously, you have a team KPI sheet next to that. And then a few KPI sheets for when I coach for NAV. The interesting one is the one on the bottom, which the defensive sheet for the USA under 18s. They were in Auckland this past year and had a phenomenal tournament. And that was their defensive heat maps. And obviously these are tools that I pay for. So if you don't have any access to that, it doesn't matter. This is just an example of how deep you can go. On the left, the green dots is all the tackles they actually made in the certain areas. So if you look in the middle, there's my green zone, blue zone, red zone, and yellow zone. So you can actually just cross-reference and see, well, in the red zone, we made a lot of tackles there, which is great. And then you look at the green zone on the right, on the middle, the green and yellow, and on the right where the red dots are, you can see that most of our missed tackles happened on the edges. So that tells us that we have weaker defenders on the edge, and that's something that we might want to work on. So that just gives you an idea of what you can do. Now, obviously, these are, I wouldn't say advanced, but these are just certain things that I've been doing. The key thing is number one, you want to make sure what works for you. You want to figure out what your KPIs are. You want to figure out if that's going to have an actual effect on having a better outcome if you do implement these changes. And then obviously the way that you present your presentation or present your data is up to you. My suggestion is don't overcomplicate it and don't over feed the players with a bunch of data points. That's not going to make a difference. The data, data analysis to me is a way. It's just merely a vehicle for a coach to kind of just either establish what he already knows, and also gives the players a some tangible information to buy into to make their changes. So I want to thank everyone for actually watching this video. Really appreciate it. I'm always available for any chats. I wear a lot of hats with a lot of different teams. So if I don't get back with you in a timely fashion, my apologies. But if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to chat about that. Again, what I'm sharing is not the Bible. It's what worked for me, and every analyst and every coach is going to look at things differently. So I really hope this helped for you guys, and thanks again to NCR for allowing me to present this. So have a good day, and reach out whenever you guys need to.